What is up, everybody? It is TGI Friday. That is right. Thank goodness it is Friday and it is snowing. I love snow. I know some of you may not, but I personally love it. I would much rather see it than rain. But anyway, with that being said, we are here today again with our weekly video devotion. Last week we started what will be a new series that we are calling We Are the Church. Again, we are the church. And it's simply talking about how church isn't something that we do, it's just who we are. And so last week we kind of started it off by looking at Jesus and how he chose to build his church upon the rock that was Peter. He chose to build his church upon people. And so the church isn't a building. The church is a gathering of people. And that's what we talked about last week. We also talked about how the church has become a breeding ground for consumerism and how we are seeking how we can, as leaders and pastors, fix that. And then we also talked about how we need to stop doing church and start being the church. And so continuing on with this series, this week I want to talk about distracting devotions. That's right, distracting devotions. So here's the deal. We all have something or someone that we are devoted to, all right? And but what happens a lot of times is certain devotions can distract us from our main devotion, which is Jesus. And so simply a distracting devotion is something or someone that takes away the focus and the time from our relationship with Jesus. And so I'm not saying that devotions are wrong. All right, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that being devoted is the wrong thing. We need to be devoted to our spouse and our family and friends and our job and all those different things. It's good to have devotion, all right? But what I'm simply saying is a lot of times in our lives we find ourselves with these distracting devotions that take away our valuable time from God. And if we really want to get technical about it, we can go all the way back to the Old Testament and look at the Ten Commandments where he says there will be no other gods before me. What is a God that is for God? Well, it's simply something that we place higher on importance than he. And so distracting devotions can look like we can allow our significant other to be a distraction. We can allow our kids to be a distraction, always keeping them in sports, always running around, always pouring all my time and effort into my kids. And again, I'm not saying we can't love our kids and that we shouldn't spend time with our kids, but there's a balance. And you can also be, unhealthy, devoted to, say, your job or what you do. And so the point is we're not talking that devotion is bad. We're simply saying that there is distracting devotions in our lives that is pulling us away from our main focus, or what should be our main focus. And so how does that tie into the church? Well, what we see is right before the huge explosion that we read about in Acts chapter 1, verse 41, where the message is delivered and there's 3,000 people added to the church that day. All right? Right before that, we go back up to Acts chapter 1, verse 14, and it says this, these all with one mind were continually devoting themselves to prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers. All right? So we see here, it says all, one mind, they were all devoting themselves to prayer. This was when Jesus said, I want you to stay in Jerusalem until I send my Holy Spirit. And that's exactly what they were doing. All together, they were meeting, about 120 of them, and they were devoting themselves to prayer. I really think that we as a body of believers have lost the devotion or the importance that there is in prayer. And some of it's because maybe we don't know what to pray. It makes us uncomfortable, or maybe we just we feel that we're not good at it. Whatever it is, we've lost our devotion to prayer. And so being devoted, again, is a good thing. And in the Bible, in the Greek, it tells us that it's to be steadfast, attentive unto, to give unremittent care to a thing. Every great move of God, you can trace it back to a group of people or an individual person who had devoted themselves to a life of prayer. And so last week we talked about the big question. And so to answer that big question is, and this is the big question we're trying to answer, is how can we as leaders help individuals own their faith and stop doing church and start being the church? How can we help people? I think the very first thing that we can do to help people begin to start being the church instead of just doing church is to begin to pray. Begin to pray that they see the importance. Begin to pray that God's glory be revealed in their lives. Begin to pray that we as leaders have the wisdom in what we can say and what we can do and how we can carry ourselves so that they see that church isn't something that we do, it's just something that we are. And so that's what I'm talking about today. So I say we start with prayer. And so that's the simple message today. I pray that, for one, you're encouraged by this, and two, that you're challenged. I'm not saying that any of you don't pray. That's not what I'm saying. But I myself included, I believe, have gotten away. I believe the church as a body, myself included, have gotten away from really just that devotion of prayer. Like on your knees, at the prayer meetings, showing up early before service and praying over the service, all these different things. Maybe you don't have to show up, but like even at your house, just getting up early just to pray specifically for Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings and all these different things. And so I feel like we need to get back, and that's where we should start as a church. To start being the church is to start praying that the individuals, whether they're believers or unbelievers, be able to see the glory of God in such a way that radical transformation happens, just like what we see in the later part of Acts chapter 1. Because as the apostles delivered this crazy message of repentance and who Jesus is and the gospel message, people's lives was radically transformed. And then we see in Acts 2, which what we will talk about next week, we'll see some key focuses that the early community or the early church really focused on as a result of that radical transformation. And so we love you guys. Thank you so much. I pray that you have a wonderful weekend. Again, if you need prayer, please let us know via text, email, or pull us aside at service. And so we love you. Again, have a great weekend, and we will see you Sunday.